The fluorescent lights of Murphy's pawn shop flickered overhead as Elena Martinez stood at the counter, her trembling fingers clutching the small velvet box that had lived in her dresser drawer for the past 3 years. Inside sat the 2-carat diamond ring that had once symbolized forever. Now it was just her last resort to keep the electricity on and food in her children's mouths. "I need to sell this," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ancient air conditioning unit. The pawnbroker, a heavy-set man named Chuck with sympathetic eyes that had seen too many desperate people, opened the box slowly. He let out a low whistle. "This is quality." "You sure about this, ma'am?"
Elena's jaw tightened. Sure? No, she wasn't sure.
She wasn't sure about anything anymore. Not since the divorce, not since losing her marketing job, not since her ex-husband Adrian had abandoned her and their 2 children for his new life of luxury with his mistress-turned-wife. But her 6-year-old daughter Lily had asked for cereal that morning, and the box had been empty. Her 9-year-old son Marcus had worn shoes with holes in them to school yesterday. The rent was overdue by 2 months, and Mrs. Chan, their landlord, had started leaving increasingly urgent notes under their door. "I'm sure," Elena said, though the words tasted like betrayal on her tongue. Chuck examined the ring under his jeweler's loupe, turning it this way and that. "Platinum band, excellent cut, VS1 clarity. This is easily worth 20,000 retail. I can give you 6,000 cash right now." $6,000. It was simultaneously everything and nothing. It would cover 3 months of rent, groceries, the overdue electric bill, new shoes for Marcus, and maybe, just maybe, leave enough for her to fix the transmission on her 15-year-old Honda so she could get to job interviews without taking 3 buses. "Okay," she breathed out, and felt something inside her chest crack apart. As Chuck counted out the bills, Elena's mind drifted back to the day Adrian had slipped that ring on her finger. They'd been standing on the beach in Malibu, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He'd told her she was his everything, his soulmate, the mother of his future children. He'd promised her the world. What he hadn't mentioned was that his promises had expiration dates.
"Here you go, ma'am."
6,000 even. Chuck slid the stack of bills across the counter, then paused. "Listen, I don't usually do this, but you got kids?" Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "There's a community center on 5th Street. They do a food bank on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Free groceries, no questions asked. My sister volunteers there." He scribbled an address on a piece of paper. "Just in case." The kindness of a stranger nearly undid her. Elena grabbed the money and the paper, mumbled a thank you, and fled before the tears could fall. Outside, the Los Angeles heat hit her like a wall. It was June, and the temperature had climbed to 95 degrees. She clutched the envelope of cash to her chest and walked the 4 blocks to the bank, hyper-aware of every person around her, terrified someone would rob her of this lifeline she'd just purchased with her past. The bank was air-conditioned and sterile, smelling of new carpet and quiet desperation. Elena deposited 5,000 into her nearly empty checking account and kept 1,000 in cash for immediate needs. As she waited for the receipt, she caught sight of herself in the reflection of the teller's plexiglass barrier. When had she become this person? Her dark hair, once glossy and professionally styled, now hung limp and needed a cut she couldn't afford. The designer clothes Adrian had bought her during their marriage had long since been replaced by Target clearance rack finds. She'd lost 20 pounds she couldn't afford to lose, and dark circles had taken up permanent residence under her eyes. "You're all set, Mrs. Martinez," the teller said brightly. "It's Ms.," Elena corrected automatically, then immediately felt petty for caring.
"Thank you."
She left the bank and stood on the sidewalk, momentarily paralyzed by exhaustion and the weight of what she'd just done. Selling that ring felt like severing the last thread connecting her to the life she'd once had, the life where she'd been Mrs. Adrian Castellano, wife of a successful tech entrepreneur, living in a 4-bedroom house in Beverly Hills, planning charity galas and children's birthday parties that cost more than most people's monthly rent.
Her phone buzzed.
A text from her neighbor, Mrs. Park, "Lily asking if you're bringing snacks for school tomorrow. Sent extras with my Daniel just in case." Shame burned through Elena's chest. Even her neighbors knew she was struggling. She typed back, "Thank you.
I'll have snacks tonight."
Grocery shopping now. At least that was true. She could go grocery shopping now. She could fill the cart with food instead of carefully calculating every item and putting half of it back before checkout. She could buy the name brand cereal Lily loved, the lunch meat Marcus preferred, fresh fruit instead of canned. Elena walked to the bus stop, her feet aching in shoes that were one rainstorm away from falling apart. As she waited, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through her job search apps, a daily ritual that had yielded exactly 3 interviews in 2 months, all of which had gone nowhere. The problem was her resume gap. 3 years as a stay-at-home mom while Adrian's company took off had seemed like a luxury at the time, a choice they'd made together so she could focus on raising Marcus and Lily. Now it was a scarlet letter marking her as unreliable, outdated,
unemployable.
The bus arrived, and Elena climbed aboard, feeding her fare card into the machine. She found a seat near the back and closed her eyes, trying to calculate how long $6,000 would actually last. 3 months of rent was $3,600 for their tiny 2-bedroom apartment in Van Nuys, a far cry from Beverly Hills, but it had a decent school district and the landlord hadn't run a credit check. Utilities would be maybe $300 a month. Groceries, if she was careful, could be $400 a month. That left not nearly enough for everything else.
Car insurance.
Gas. Clothes the kids would outgrow in 6 months.
School supplies.
Medicine if anyone got sick.
She needed a job.
Desperately. The bus lurched to a stop, and Elena opened her eyes to see they were in front of Westfield Plaza, one of the upscale shopping centers she used to frequent. Through the window, she could see women carrying shopping bags from Nordstrom and Neiman Marcus, their perfectly highlighted hair and designer sunglasses glinting in the sunlight.
That used to be her. And then she saw him.
Adrian Castellano stood in front of the Tesla dealership, his arm around a blonde woman Elena recognized from Instagram stalking sessions she wasn't proud of, Sienna Winters, his new wife. They were laughing, and Adrian was gesturing animatedly at a sleek red Model S in the showroom window. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't seen him in person in almost a year, not since the divorce was finalized. He looked exactly the same, tall, handsome, with that perfect olive skin and those dark eyes that had once looked at her like she hung the moon. He was wearing what she recognized as a Tom Ford suit, probably $3,000. His watch caught the light, a Rolex she didn't recognize.
New then.
While she just sold her wedding ring for grocery money, he was buying his new wife a Tesla. The rage that surged through Elena was so intense she felt dizzy. Her hands gripped the edge of the bus seat, knuckles white. 3 years ago, Adrian had stood in their Beverly Hills kitchen and told her his company was struggling, that they needed to tighten their belts, that she needed to understand he was under enormous stress.
She'd believed him.
She'd cut back on everything, stopped getting her hair done, shopped sales, made do. Then she discovered the credit card statements.
The hotel rooms. The gifts to Sienna.
The business trips that were actually weekend getaways. When she'd confronted him, he'd acted like she was the unreasonable one. The divorce had been swift and brutal. His lawyers had been sharks, hers had been overworked and underpaid. Adrian had claimed his company was over-leveraged with debt, and his forensic accountant had produced spreadsheets showing he was barely breaking even. She'd gotten minimal alimony for 2 years only, child support that barely covered essentials, and nothing else. She'd been too defeated to fight harder. But now, watching him casually shop for luxury cars, Elena realized the full scope of his betrayal.
He'd hidden his assets. He'd lied under oath.
And she'd been too broken, too exhausted, too ashamed to push back. The bus pulled away, and Adrian disappeared from view. Elena sat frozen, her mind racing. Could she reopen the divorce case? Did she have any proof? The statute of limitations for fraud had to be.
Her phone buzzed again.
This time it was a call from Marcus's school.
Ms. Martinez? This is Principal Cooper.
I'm calling because Marcus got into an altercation during lunch today. Can you come pick him up? Elena closed her eyes.
What happened?
Another student made some unkind comments about his shoes.
Marcus punched him.
The other boy is fine, but we have a zero-tolerance policy for violence. Marcus is suspended for 3 days.
Of course.
Of course this was happening now. I'll be there in 30 minutes. She hung up and pressed the button for the next stop. The grocery shopping would have to wait. Everything would have to wait. As Elena exited the bus and started walking toward the nearest bus stop that would take her to Marcus's school, she felt the weight of the $1,000 in her purse, the money she'd gotten from selling her past to barely sustain her present. But something else was growing inside her too. A spark of anger that had been smothered under exhaustion and shame for too long. Seeing Adrian had ignited something. He had taken everything from her. Her marriage, her home, her financial security, her sense of self. He'd left her struggling to feed their children while he lived in luxury with his mistress-turned-wife. But he'd made a mistake. He'd forgotten who she used to be before she became his wife. Before she traded her career for carpool and PDA meetings, Elena Martinez had been a rising star in marketing at one of LA's top firms. She'd been sharp, strategic, relentless. She'd been someone who didn't take no for an answer. That woman was still in there somewhere, buried under the wreckage of the past 3 years. And maybe it was time to dig her out. Elena's phone buzzed with a notification, an email from a job application she'd submitted 2 weeks ago and forgotten about. She opened it while waiting for the next bus. Dear Ms. Martinez, we were impressed with your resume and would like to schedule an interview for the senior marketing manager position. Are you available next Monday at 10 a.m.? Elena read it twice, 3 times, making sure it was real. The position was at Sterling & Associates, a boutique marketing firm in Century City. The salary range listed on the job posting had been $85,000-$110,000. Enough to change everything. She typed back immediately, I would be delighted to interview on Monday at 10 a.m. Thank you for this opportunity. As she hit send, Marcus's school came into view. Elena took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked toward the building. Her son needed her to be strong right now.
They both did.
But first, she needed to pick up her 9-year-old who'd punched someone over shoes with holes in them. Shoes that were holes because his father had lied and cheated and stolen the life they should have had. The secretary buzzed her into the office, and Elena found Marcus sitting on a bench outside Principal Cooper's office, his face defiant but his eyes red-rimmed.
When he saw her, his expression crumbled. I'm sorry, Mom.
He said we were poor trash and Dad left us because we weren't good enough and... Elena dropped to her knees in front of him, pulling him into a fierce hug.
Stop.
None of that is true.
None of it.
But we are poor, Marcus whispered against her shoulder.
I know we are.
I heard you crying about the rent. And Dad never visits. He doesn't even call anymore. The truth was a knife twisting in Elena's gut. Listen to me, she said, pulling back to look him in the eyes. What we have or don't have in our bank account doesn't define who we are. You are smart, kind, and brave. And your father. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Your father is dealing with his own issues. But that's on him, not you. Never you. Mrs. Martinez? Principal Cooper stood in his doorway.
Can we chat?
The meeting was mercifully brief. Marcus was suspended for 3 days, but Principal Cooper admitted, quietly, that the other boy had instigated and would also face consequences. Elena assured him it wouldn't happen again, shook his hand, and led Marcus out to the parking lot. We're taking the bus, she told him when he looked around for the car. Is it broken again? Just being careful with gas money. Not entirely a lie. On the bus ride home, Marcus leaned against her shoulder, and Elena thought about the interview on Monday. She thought about Adrian at the Tesla dealership. She thought about the wedding ring she'd never see again. And she thought about what she was going to do about all of it. When they got home to their small apartment, Lily was with Mrs. Park next door, doing homework. Elena thanked her profusely and brought both children inside. As they settled onto the worn couch, a Facebook Marketplace find, to watch cartoons, Elena went to her tiny bedroom and opened her laptop. She created a new folder on her desktop and labeled it, Adrian Castellano Fraud Investigation. It was time to find out exactly how much her ex-husband had stolen. And it was time to take it all back. Elena stood in front of her closet at 6:30 a.m. on Monday morning, staring at the pathetic collection of clothes hanging before her. The interview at Sterling & Associates was in 3.5 hours, and she had exactly one professional outfit left from her old life, a navy blue sheath dress and matching blazer that she'd managed to hold onto through 3 moves and countless purges of belongings she'd sold to make ends meet. She pulled the dress off the hanger and held it up to the morning light filtering through her bedroom's single window. A small moth hole near the hem made her stomach drop. When had that happened?
Mom.
Lily's voice came from the doorway. Why are you up so early? Elena turned to find her daughter standing there in Princess Elsa pajamas that were getting too short in the legs, her dark curls matted from sleep. I have a job interview today, baby.
A really important one.
Lily's eyes widened. Does that mean we'll have more money?
Can we go to Disneyland?
The innocent question pierced Elena's heart. When was the last time she'd been able to give her children something beyond the bare necessities? One step at a time, sweetheart. But yes, if I get this job, things will be better. Will Daddy come back if we have money again? Elena set down the dress and knelt in front of her daughter, taking both of Lily's small hands in hers. This was the question Lily asked in different variations at least once a week, and it never got easier to answer. Daddy not being here has nothing to do with money, Lily. And even if we had all the money in the world, Daddy has made choices that mean he won't be living with us. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. The lie tasted bitter. Adrian had called his children exactly twice in the past 6 months. His child support payments came automatically through the court system, but there were no birthday cards, no Christmas presents, no spontaneous calls just to hear their voices.
He'd simply moved on.
Started fresh with Sienna, who Elena had learned through some strategic Instagram investigation was 28, a former model, and apparently allergic to the concept of having children. Okay, Lily said softly, but Elena could see the doubt in her daughter's eyes. 6-year-olds were more perceptive than people gave them credit for. After getting both kids ready and walking them to Mrs. Park's apartment, she'd agreed to watch them during the suspension in exchange for Elena deep cleaning her apartment this weekend. Elena returned home to prepare for her interview. She spent 45 minutes with a needle and navy thread, carefully repairing the moth hole until it was nearly invisible. Then she laid out the complete outfit, the dress, blazer, her one pair of nude heels that she'd resold twice, and a simple gold necklace that had been her grandmother's. In the shower, she let the hot water run over her longer than she should have, mentally preparing herself. This interview wasn't just about a job, it was about reclaiming her identity. Elena Martinez had once been damn good at marketing. She'd built campaigns that had won awards. She'd managed teams and budgets and impossible deadlines. That woman was still in here somewhere. She dried her hair carefully, working with the natural wave rather than fighting it since she no longer owned a flat iron. Makeup was minimal. She'd been stretching the same drugstore products for months, but she made it work. A little concealer for the dark circles, mascara, a touch of lipstick. When she looked in the mirror, she saw someone who almost resembled the old Elena.
Professional. Competent.
Definitely not someone who'd sold her wedding ring in a pawn shop 4 days ago. The bus ride to Century City took 50 minutes and 2 transfers. Elena spent the time reviewing everything she could find about Sterling and Associates on her phone. Boutique marketing firm, 15 years in business, specializing in luxury brands and high-end retail clients. The CEO was a woman named Margaret Sterling, a legend in LA marketing circles. Elena had actually met her once, at an industry conference 7 years ago, though Margaret would never remember. The office was in a sleek glass building off Avenue of the Stars. Elena arrived 20 minutes early and spent 15 of them in the Starbucks across the street, sipping water she didn't have to pay for and giving herself a final pep talk. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection in her phone's camera.
"You are qualified. You are capable.
You deserve this." At 9:55 a.m., Elena walked into Sterling and Associates' reception area. The space screamed understated luxury, minimalist furniture, original artwork on the walls, a receptionist who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. "Elena Martinez," she told the receptionist. "I have a 10 a.m. interview with Ms. Sterling." "Yes. She's expecting you."
"Can I get you some water? Coffee?"
"Water would be lovely, thank you." The receptionist disappeared and returned with water in an actual glass, not a plastic cup, and gestured to a seating area with leather chairs that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent. "Ms. Sterling will be with you in just a moment." Elena sat carefully, mindful of her posture, her breathing, every detail.
This was her shot.
She couldn't afford to blow it.
"Ms. Martinez?"
Elena looked up to find Margaret Sterling herself standing there. Not an assistant or an HR representative, but the CEO. She was in her early 60s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob, wearing a black pantsuit that was clearly custom-tailored. Her eyes were intelligent and assessing. "Thank you for coming in," Margaret said, extending her hand. "I'm Margaret Sterling. I'll be conducting your interview personally." "It's an honor," Elena said, shaking her hand firmly. "I've followed your career for years. Your campaign for Belmont Hotels was studied in my graduate marketing course." A small smile crossed Margaret's face. "That was 15 years ago. You've done your homework." She gestured toward the hallway. "Shall we?" Margaret's office was corner-positioned with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of Century City. The desk was organized chaos, stacks of campaign proposals, a laptop surrounded by post-it notes, and a wall covered in what looked like current project timelines. "Forgive the mess," Margaret said, not sounding remotely apologetic. "We're in the middle of 3 major pitches."
"Have a seat."
Elena sat in one of the chairs facing the desk, and Margaret settled into her own chair, pulling up something on her laptop. "So, Elena Martinez," Margaret said, studying the screen. "UCLA graduate, marketing degree. 7 years at Pearson & Associates, where you made junior partner at 29, impressive. Then you left too."
She looked up.
"Can you tell me about the gap in your resume?"
Here it was.
The question Elena had been dreading at every interview. She tried different approaches, being vague, being overly detailed, deflecting. Nothing had worked. This time, she decided to just tell the truth. "I left to raise my children," Elena said evenly. My then husband's tech company was taking off, and we made the decision together that I would focus on our family. I thought it was temporary. But then the company grew faster than expected, my husband developed different priorities that didn't include me, and the marriage ended. I'm now a single mother of two, and I need to rebuild my career. Margaret's expression didn't change. You were out of the industry for 3 years.
I was.
But I didn't spend those 3 years idle. I ran every PTA fundraiser at my son's school, generating $50,000 in donations through campaigns I designed. I managed a neighborhood social media network that grew to 2,000 members. I consulted for free for 3 local small businesses, helping them rebrand and increase their customer bases by an average of 40%. And I stayed current. I read industry publications, took online courses, maintained my professional network. Why should I hire someone who's been out of the game when I could hire someone who's been in it? The question was blunt, almost aggressive, but Elena recognized the test for what it was. Margaret wanted to see if she'd fold. Because someone who's been continuously employed for the last 3 years hasn't had to fight for every single thing they have, Elena said, leaning forward. They haven't had to get creative with nothing. They haven't had to prove themselves from the bottom up. I'm hungry, Miss Sterling. I'm strategic. And I guarantee you that I will outwork, outthink and outperform anyone else you're considering because I have to. Failure isn't an option for me. It never was, but now it's literally not an option. I have 2 kids depending on me to succeed. Margaret studied her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she closed the laptop. Tell me about a campaign you're proud of. For the next 45 minutes, Elena talked. She walked through the Lexington Boutique Hotels campaign she'd led at Pearson, the demographics research, the positioning strategy, the multimedia execution. She discussed metrics and ROI and pivot points. She answered questions about team management, budget allocation, and crisis response. And somewhere in the middle of it, she forgot to be nervous. This was her element. This was who she was, stripped of all the other identities that had been layered on top: wife, mother, abandoned woman, struggling single parent. This was just Elena, marketing strategist, and she was damn good at it. One more question, Margaret said as the interview wound down.
Your ex-husband.
Adrian Castellano, correct? Elena's blood went cold.
Yes.
His company, Castellano Tech, is one of our clients. Would that be a problem? The world seemed to tilt sideways. Adrian was a client here?
Of course he was.
His company had blown up in the 3 years since their divorce, going from a struggling startup to a multi-million-dollar tech firm. Of course he'd have a high-end marketing firm on retainer. Elena's mind raced through the implications. Working at the same firm that handled Adrian's account could be disastrous, or it could be the opportunity she'd been looking for to prove his fraud.
It won't be a problem, Elena said carefully. I'm a professional.
My personal history with Mr. Castellano won't affect my work quality or judgment. You say that, Margaret said, but I've been in this business for 35 years. I've seen personal drama tank more than one account. I'm asking you directly, can you work for a firm that takes his money and promotes his company? The honest answer was that Elena didn't know. The thought of using her skills to make Adrian richer made her want to scream.
But she needed this job.
She needed it desperately. I can, Elena said, as long as I'm never directly assigned to his account. Put me on any other client, and I promise you'll never have a single issue related to my ex-husband. Margaret nodded slowly.
Fair enough.
She stood, and Elena followed suit. I have 2 more candidates to interview this week. You'll hear from us by Friday, one way or another. Thank you for your time, Elena said, shaking her hand again. I appreciate the opportunity. In the elevator down, Elena let herself slump against the wall for just a moment.
She'd done well, she knew she had. But was it enough?
Her phone buzzed as she stepped out onto the street. A text from an unknown number. Is this Elena Martinez? We need to talk about Adrian. Meet me at Grounds Coffee on Wilshire at 1 p.m.
Come alone. S.
Elena stared at the message, her heart pounding.
Who was this?
What did they know about Adrian? She checked the time, 11:20 a.m. She had time to get there, but should she? This could be anything from a prank to something dangerous. Another text came through from the same number. I know about the hidden accounts. I know what he did to you. I can help, but only if you meet me.
Hidden accounts.
That's what Elena had suspected, that Adrian had squirreled away money offshore or in shell companies to hide his assets during the divorce. But she'd never been able to prove it, and her lawyer had been too overwhelmed with other cases to dig deep. If this person really had information, Elena made a decision. She texted back, "I'll be there." She had 2 hours to kill before the meeting. Elena walked to a nearby public library, found a corner computer terminal, and logged into her email. The folder she created, Adrian Castellano Fraud Investigation, was still relatively empty, just a few screenshots from his Instagram showing the lavish lifestyle he claimed he couldn't afford. But if this mysterious S really had information about hidden accounts, Elena needed to be prepared. She opened a new document and started making notes about everything she remembered from the divorce proceedings, every financial statement his lawyer had presented, every claim about his company's supposed debt and struggles. The Castellano Tech website boasted about their recent Series B funding round, $50 million. That had been announced 6 months after their divorce was finalized. Adrian had claimed during the proceedings that the company was barely solvent, that he'd maxed out personal credit cards to keep it afloat. Either the company had experienced the most miraculous turnaround in startup history, or Adrian had been lying through his teeth. Elena's money was on the latter. At 12:45 p.m., she logged out of the computer and headed to Grounds Coffee. The cafe was busy with the lunch crowd, but Elena spotted an empty table in the back corner and claimed it, ordering just a small coffee she couldn't really afford but felt obligated to buy. She sat facing the door, watching everyone who entered. At 1:03 p.m., a woman walked in who made Elena's breath catch. She was in her early 30s, professionally dressed in a gray pencil skirt and white blouse, with auburn hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She scanned the cafe, made eye contact with Elena, and walked directly to her table. "Elena Martinez?" the woman asked quietly.
"That's me. And you are?" "Sophia Chun.
I worked, at Castellano Tech.
In finance."
She sat down without waiting for an invitation, setting her purse on the table. "I was Adrian's senior accountant until 3 weeks ago."
Elena's pulse quickened.
"What happened 3 weeks ago?" "I got fired for asking too many questions about discrepancies I found in the company books." Sophia pulled a USB drive from her purse and set it on the table between them. "Before they escorted me out, I made copies of everything. I probably violated a dozen NDAs and employment laws, but I don't care. What he did to you wasn't right, and what he's doing to his investors and the IRS isn't right either." "What did he do?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sophia glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned forward. "During your divorce, Adrian moved approximately $8 million into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. He claimed the company was struggling, but he'd actually just closed a series of funding round for $15 million. He inflated expense reports, created fake vendor contracts with shell companies he controlled, and basically committed fraud to make it look like Castellano Tech was underwater when it was actually thriving." The coffee shop seemed to disappear around Elena.
$8 million.
While she'd been agreeing to minimal alimony and barely adequate child support because she believed he was struggling, he'd had $8 million hidden away. "Why are you telling me this?" Elena managed to ask. "Why risk yourself?"
Sophia's expression hardened. "Because I have a daughter. She's 4.
And if my ex-husband ever tried to do to me what Adrian did to you, lie, cheat, steal from his own children, I'd want someone to help me fight back." She pushed the USB drive across the table. "Everything is on there. Account numbers, transfer records, emails between Adrian and his accountant plotting how to hide assets, the whole thing. It's enough to reopen your divorce case and probably enough to interest the SEC and IRS." Elena picked up the USB drive with trembling fingers. This small piece of plastic and metal represented the evidence she'd been looking for, the proof she'd need to make Adrian pay for what he'd done. "How do I know this is real?" she asked. "How do I know you're not setting me up somehow?"
"You don't," Sophia admitted.
"But you can verify everything with a forensic accountant. The account numbers are real. The transfers are documented. I'm giving you a roadmap, but you'll need to do the actual investigation to make it hold up in court." "This could destroy his company," Elena said slowly. "His company is built on fraud and lies. If it gets destroyed, that's on him, not you."
Sophia stood up.
"I need to go. I probably shouldn't even be here."
"But, good luck, Elena."
"Make him pay for what he did to you and your kids." She walked out before Elena could respond, leaving Elena sitting there holding a USB drive that could change everything. For several minutes, Elena just sat there, her mind racing through the possibilities and the dangers. If she pursued this, Adrian would fight back hard. He'd hire the best lawyers. He'd drag her through the mud. He'd make her life even more difficult than it already was.
But he'd also pay.
He'd pay for the lies, for the stolen money, for abandoning his children. He'd pay for forcing her to sell her wedding ring to feed those children while he bought Teslas for his new wife. Elena slipped the USB drive into her purse and left the cafe. She had a plan to make, evidence to verify, and a war to prepare for. But first, she needed to pick up her kids from Mrs. Parks, make them dinner with the groceries she'd finally been able to afford, and tuck them into bed with kisses and promises that tomorrow would be better. Because tomorrow would be better. She'd make sure of it. On the bus ride home, Elena's phone rang with an unknown number.
Her heart jumped. Was it Sophia calling? Had something gone wrong? Hello.
Ms. Martinez, this is Margaret Sterling.
Elena's breath caught.
Ms. Sterling. I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon. I don't believe in making people wait when I've made up my mind. I'm offering you the senior marketing manager position at Sterling & Associates. $95,000 annual salary, full benefits, 3 weeks vacation. Can you start Monday? Elena closed her eyes, feeling tears prick at her lids.
Yes. Absolutely yes.
Thank you, Miss Sterling. You won't regret this.
I know I won't.
Welcome to Sterling & Associates, Elena. Get some rest this week, you're going to hit the ground running. The call ended, and Elena sat there on the bus, clutching the USB drive in her purse with one hand and her phone with the other. In the span of 6 hours, her entire life had shifted.
She had a job.
She had evidence.
She had hope.
Now she just needed to figure out what to do with all three. When she got home, Marcus and Lily were waiting for her, and the second she walked through the door, they tackled her with hugs. Did you get the job? Marcus asked, his eyes bright with hope. I got the job, Elena confirmed, and felt tears finally spill over as both her children cheered. Does this mean we can get pizza?
Lily asked.
Elena laughed through her tears.
Yeah, baby.
We can get pizza. While the kids debated toppings, Elena went to her bedroom and plugged the USB drive into her laptop. The drive contained dozens of folders, each meticulously labeled: offshore accounts, shell companies, falsified expense reports, email correspondence, original funding documents. Sophia hadn't been exaggerating. This was a treasure trove. Elena opened the offshore accounts folder and found herself staring at bank statements from 3 different Cayman Island banks, all showing account balances in the millions and all listing Adrian Castellano as the primary account holder. The transfer dates coincided exactly with their divorce proceedings. He'd been hiding this money while claiming poverty. While fighting her for every dollar of child support. While forcing her to accept barely anything in the settlement. Elena's hands shook as she clicked through document after document, each one building the case that Adrian Castellano had committed divorce fraud on a massive scale.
Her phone buzzed.
A text from an unknown number, a different one than Sophia's. I know what you're planning. Back off, or you'll regret it.
A friend.
Elena stared at the threatening text, her heart pounding.
Someone knew.
Someone was watching. But she'd come too far to back down now. She screenshotted the threat, saved it to her investigation folder, and then blocked the number. If Adrian wanted to intimidate her, he'd have to try harder than that. The pizza arrived, and Elena sat with her children at their tiny dining table, watching them devour pepperoni and cheese with such joy that it made her heart ache. These were the people she was fighting for. Not just herself, but Marcus and Lily, who deserved better than a father who'd abandoned them for a shinier life. After dinner, after baths and bedtime stories, after finally getting both kids settled in their shared bedroom, Elena returned to her laptop and the evidence that could change everything. She opened a new email and addressed it to the best divorce attorney in Los Angeles, one she'd researched but never been able to afford before. Now, with her new job and the promise of justice, she could.
Dear Mr. Thornton.
My name is Elena Martinez, and I need to reopen my divorce case. I have evidence that my ex-husband committed fraud during our proceedings, hiding millions of dollars in assets while claiming poverty. I've attached a summary of the evidence I've obtained. If you're interested in taking my case, please contact me at your earliest convenience. I should mention that my ex-husband is Adrian Castellano of Castellano Tech. He has significant resources and will fight this aggressively. I need someone who won't be intimidated by his lawyers or his money. I'm prepared to fight for as long as it takes. Sincerely,
Elena Martinez.
She attached the most damning documents from the USB drive, took a deep breath, and hit send. There was no going back now.
The war had begun.